Yeah, so there are three distinct components to how enterprises adopt cloud. The first phase is a non-blocking live data movement to the cloud. And what does that mean? That means that you got a massive quantity of data. You need to move it in a single scan from on-premises into cloud and still allow users to use all the applications, all the data while it's moving. That's a really hard problem and one that we exclusively solve here at WANdisco. And then when you've got the data into the cloud, you then need to build a hybrid cloud environment. Why do you need to do that? Well, you need to do that because it's impossible to move all the applications in one file swoop from on-premises into cloud. That could take years. Some people think up to 20 years in terms of rebuilding, piecing together all the on-premise applications and rebuilding in the cloud. That requires an active hybrid cloud environment. So you have the same data both on premises and cloud, guaranteed data consistency. That's phase 2 for WANdisco, and that's a separate license. That's an annual recurring license that customers, after they've moved the data, license number 1, and then when they've got the data in the cloud, license number 2 is to build out a hybrid cloud. Then what happens, and most people say, well, okay, what happens to WANdisco when everybody's moved all their data and applications into the cloud? They don't need you anymore. Wrong, because all customers are going to choose more than one cloud, either for geo-redundancy within the same cloud vendor, or alternatively, because Amazon might have got the best serverless compute Lambda functions, Google might have got the best artificial intelligence programs, and Microsoft may have got the best analytics applications, and that's called a multi-cloud environment, and that also requires guaranteed consistent data, and WANdisco is the only provider of that solution too. So the relationships that WANdisco has in the cloud at the moment are primarily co-sell with some product integration. There is scope to enhance all of those relationships with the major cloud vendors, and we announced an OEM with Alibaba. That's very important for the company in the future. We also have partnerships with Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, and Google Cloud too. So deeper product integration and a slight change in the go-to-market strategy with those customers, with those partners, is something that I could see us doing in the future. One of the things that I wouldn't say frustrates me, but is the confusion that exists in the market. So people hear the word multi-cloud, or they hear the word data replication, and it sounds like it's the same thing that WANdisco does. So somebody asked me a question recently about Anthos, which was the Google announcement around multi-cloud. So what Google are talking about there, for example, is putting applications into containers. They're called Kubernetes containers, which is a bit like Docker. So you can put all your applications into a container and then move it and have that run on a completely different cloud. And that's their definition of multi-cloud, which is at the application level. WANdisco is at the data level. So that has absolutely nothing to do with anything that WANdisco does. In fact, that helps us because the portability of applications is really important for our data strategy. And then secondly, you'll hear, companies like Attunity, for example, that have change data capture technology. So when changes occur in system A, then it blocks and then moves it to system B. So remember, WANdisco is a live data platform. That's a very specific term for our technology. It's unique. We hold a number of patents in the way in which you achieve active WAN-scope data replication. That's still fundamental to our platform, to our solutions, and to our technology. And that's why our customers and partners are so dependent on us. In the presentation, in the results presentation, we identified a medium-term opportunity for WANdisco to grow revenues to $100 million. And we identified 4 buckets of the sort of path to do that. The first bucket is sort of OEM revenue guarantees that come from these deeply embedded partnerships. We announced one of those with IBM. We said that could be in the sort of 25 million plus range. I mean, that would be certainly very conservative. The second bucket is in terms of migration to cloud. Of those 3 steps I highlighted earlier, that first step is there are thousands of petabytes on premise that have to move to cloud. That's a 50 million plus opportunity for WANdisco, and I think that's very conservative. The third bucket is what I identified as the third step, which is multi-cloud. So customers that are going to adopt multiple clouds. That's a 25 million. We've already closed several deals in that space already. That's a $25 million opportunity. And then what we've been doing traditionally, which is on-premise, disaster recovery, etc. That's we've already demonstrated execution in that space. That will continue, we think, to be a $10 million plus space. So that takes you to 100 million of annual recurring license revenue.
Well, recurring revenue is the way that annual recurring contracts is the way people consume cloud services today. The cloud is an elastic medium, so you buy what you need when you need it, rather than under a perpetual license regime, trying to estimate what you'll need over the next 3 to 5 years. And you always have a suboptimal allocation. Either you have too much and you don't have enough. And most people like me are good cash managers. They really want to buy what they need. And so that's the way folks consume cloud services today. So we're really going to the market the way the market expects to consume these services. It's also something that's it's in the heritage of the company. With our initial product, our live code product, has always been an annual recurring revenue model. And so we're quite good at tracking renewals, building up the cohorts of contracts, and then we know what time to go back and seek a renewal. And with that product, we have basically no churn. And as we'll be part of infrastructure, we don't see that there'll be a significant churn either on the annual recurring component for WANdisco Fusion. First of all, it's easy. You have to remember that we're an intellectual property company, first and foremost. We sell IP in the form of software. So there's no services component, and gross margins are very high. If on a typical gross margin, non-GAAP, it's really essentially 100%. There's some costs that get subtracted out for our FRS presentation, but essentially it's 100% gross margin business. Secondarily, we go to market with our channel partners, which gives us a highly efficient distribution model that can scale basically frictionless. Of course, you'll add a few people on the demand gen side to make sure those channels are being taken care of properly and being serviced, and our partners know how to sell the product and how to take it to market. But that's a very small amount, as opposed to a lot of companies that are doing a direct sales model, which costs on the SG&A line scales dramatically quickly along with the revenue line. For us, that'll be decoupled. So the cost will rise in absolute dollar terms. In percentage terms, though, it'll drop significantly as we get that efficiency. We can go to market and attack the $100 million medium-term target, as David was discussing, with very little cost input to the business. So that means net, once we're at that level, that the net margins will be fairly high. Yeah, I think from looking at key milestones, obviously everybody is interested in our progress with the strategic relationships and how that works. So I would look for announcements around those as indicative of progress. That leads to how the product gets embedded, goes to market in a much smoother fashion, and goes back and adds even more efficiency to the channel. So that's a very important piece. And then also look at what we announce along with customer wins. We have a significant pipeline this year. We feel that it's strong and it's growing, and it's heavily biased toward cloud for us. So look at those cloud wins as an indicative of how we're traveling this year.